Imagine living each day with total control, where your emotions serve you, not sabotage you. Imagine a mindset so solid, so unshakable, that no insult, no crisis, no loss, no delay could ever penetrate it. This is not fantasy. This is the demand of greatness, as taught by Napoleon Hill. In Think and Grow Rich, Hill made it clear: self-discipline begins with the mastery of your thoughts. And in Outwitting the Devil, he warned that emotional instability is the devil's greatest weapon. If your emotions control you, your results will always be chaotic. But when you control your emotions, you control your fate. This video is a blueprint to that emotional domination. You'll learn how the giants of success act calm under fire, how they move with purpose even when provoked, and how they guard their energy with the force of trained warriors. This is not about becoming cold. It's about becoming precise. It's not about suppressing emotion. It's about directing it. Control your emotional world, or the world will control you. You'll discover how to make emotional resilience a habit, how to respond, not react, and how to carry yourself with such mental composure that no chaos can touch you. Because nothing can shake a man who governs his own mind. By the end of this journey, you won't just understand control. You'll radiate it. When you train your mind to remain calm in the face of chaos, you access a level of power that few ever reach. Napoleon Hill was relentless in his teachings. True strength is invisible. It's not loud, it doesn't flinch, it doesn't scream to be recognized. It simply is. And emotional dominance is the core of that invisible force. Hill didn't see emotions as weaknesses, but as tools, either sharpened for purpose or dulled by neglect. In Think and Grow Rich, he emphasizes that every human action is driven by emotion, and that those who learn to govern their emotional machinery can direct their lives with surgical precision. The average person is a puppet pulled by fear, anger, envy, or doubt. The uncommon man trains his inner world until no emotion enters without permission. When he wrote, "You are the master of your fate, the captain of your soul," he wasn't being poetic. He was issuing a command. A mind that reacts emotionally is not free. It is in chains. Whether it's the panic that sets in during uncertainty or the fury that rises when challenged, these emotions signal one thing: vulnerability to external control. Hill's interviews with giants of industry revealed an unmistakable pattern. Those who built empires did not waste emotion. They didn't erupt when attacked. They didn't sulk when betrayed. They didn't collapse when plans failed. They adjusted, they moved, they advanced, because emotion was not their master. It was their servant, and this mastery begins with one commitment: never react immediately. The emotionally weak explode. The emotionally strong pause. That pause, small, controlled, conscious, is the difference between destruction and domination. Hill called this deliberate thought, and in it lies the seed of all self-command. You must realize, every test you face in life, every insult, delay, rejection, is not a barrier. It's an invitation to refine your emotional system. Hill spoke of the devil as a symbol of drifting, and drifting begins the moment emotion overtakes reason. He warned that those who cannot control their reactions are easily manipulated by unseen forces. These forces don't need to overpower you. They only need to distract you, and emotion is the perfect bait. Consider your own life. How many times have you been pulled off course because of a feeling? A burst of anger that cost you a relationship, a wave of fear that froze your progress, a surge of pride that made you ignore wise counsel. These aren't coincidences. These are signs that the controls of your inner world have been left unguarded. To regain that control, Hill insisted on self-discipline through repetition, autosuggestion, feeding your subconscious the instructions of mastery daily, visualization, seeing yourself respond with calm under pressure, definiteness of purpose, so you are not blown around by every emotional gust, but rooted in a mission that cannot be shaken. This is why he placed self-control alongside faith, persistence, and definiteness as the cornerstones of success. Without emotional discipline, your vision becomes fogged, your decisions impulsive, and your energy scattered. But when your emotions are mastered, your path clears, your movements sharpen, and your impact intensifies. There is a certain stillness in the mind of the strong. It's not the stillness of inactivity, it's the stillness of command. While others react, they observe. While others panic, they prepare. While others collapse, they stand immovable. And in that silence, that emotional stillness, something extraordinary happens. The noise of the world fades. You begin to hear your own voice, not the voice of fear or doubt or ego, but the voice of clarity, the voice of your higher self. And from that place, decisions are made not out of pressure, but out of purpose. That's where Hill's true lesson leads us. Not to the suppression of feeling, but to the transformation of it. Emotion becomes energy, reaction becomes response, and power, the true kind, becomes your default state. It is from this foundation that we now move to examine how to weaponize this inner stillness, how to carry it into conflict, into ambition, into every arena where your presence must dominate without ever needing to raise your voice. To live with total control is not to live without conflict. It's to navigate every conflict with strategy rather than emotion. After understanding the destructive force of emotional reactivity, the next imperative becomes clear. You must become the conscious architect of every response you deliver to the world. Napoleon Hill taught that no man is truly free until he can choose his responses independent of his emotional state. In Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, Hill reveals a core truth. A positive mental attitude is the right mental attitude in all circumstances. The implication is bold. No situation, no matter how offensive, chaotic, or unexpected, justifies an undisciplined reaction. There is always a higher response available, and it is our responsibility to find it. This isn't passivity. This is a form of spiritual warfare. When you choose your response with discipline, you disengage from the reactive patterns that keep average people enslaved. You no longer answer provocation with provocation. You answer it with intention. Hill called this definiteness of action. It is the calculated use of your thoughts and emotions toward a predetermined outcome. Most people have no blueprint for how they react. They are triggered into behavior by habit. Someone insults them. They retaliate. A door closes. They rage. A delay arrives. They panic. This is not humanity. This is programming. Hill's entire philosophy was built on the idea that you must reprogram yourself deliberately through autosuggestion, visualization, affirmation, and action. The question then becomes, what outcome are you designing for? Because your reaction is always a blueprint being laid down. Every emotional choice you make reinforces a structure. In your mind, do it often enough, and you construct a fortress of poise or a prison of volatility. To become the architect, you must develop emotional foresight. You must anticipate where a given emotion will lead and decide in advance whether it's worth the cost. That's what Hill meant by accurate thinking, a refusal to be carried away by temporary feelings in place of long-term vision. This is where personal power is built. Not in the intensity of your emotions, but in your ability to place them where they belong. Just as an engineer doesn't guess where the foundation should go, you don't guess how to respond when life tests you. You build the response before the test arrives. Think of emotional discipline as a muscle. In the beginning, it trembles under pressure, but with repetition, resistance, and correction, it becomes unshakable. Hill insisted on consistent inner conditioning. Write out your chief aim, repeat your affirmations daily, visualize the version of yourself that no longer reacts emotionally but calculates, observes, and acts with precision. Nowhere was this more evident than in his descriptions of those who achieved greatness. Their victories weren't born from talent alone. They came from restraint, from self-command, from being the person who chooses to respond from the higher self, even when the lower self is begging for release. And here's the secret Hill embedded in all his teachings. You are never responding to reality. You are only ever responding to your interpretation of it. Change the interpretation, and you instantly change the emotional charge behind it. That is the lever most never touch, and the lever that gives you control over everything. To live by design, not by default, is to strip away the illusions that emotions are facts. They are not. They are chemical shadows of perception, and a disciplined mind filters those shadows through logic, purpose, and principle. Once this becomes your default operation, once you have rehearsed your emotional architecture daily, there is no situation that can unbalance you. There is no person who can make you feel anything. You remain in command, and from this command, every decision you make becomes deliberate, every word you speak becomes loaded with power, and every move you execute becomes aligned with your highest objective. While the world rushes, reacts, and rages, there exists a silent power few ever access, the power of stillness. Not the stillness of inactivity, but the stillness of complete internal order. Napoleon Hill pointed to this discipline as a requirement for mastery over self and environment. It is the quality that separates those who influence from those who are influenced. Stillness, in Hill's philosophy, is not silence. It is presence. It is the trained ability to remain unmoved internally while chaos explodes externally. In Outwitting the Devil, Hill warns us that drifting, living without internal direction, makes us vulnerable to fear, doubt, and manipulation. But stillness anchors you. It is your defiance against the currents of distraction. This kind of stillness is not given. It must be built through morning routines anchored in purpose, through scheduled solitude, through journaling, prayer, and reflection. Hill described definiteness of purpose as the most powerful force in existence, and stillness is where that definiteness becomes real. It is where your vision stops being a concept and becomes a command. The man who is still within hears signals that others miss. He sees patterns before they form. He prepares while others panic. He makes decisions that echo long beyond the present moment, because his actions are born from center, not from noise. Stillness trains perception. It sharpens awareness. Hill's entire success formula revolves around this internal alertness, a calm intensity, a mind so ordered it cannot be derailed by outside chaos. It is a mind that reflects instead of reacts, a mind that acts from plan, not pressure. And what is most misunderstood is that stillness isn't a lack of emotion. It is emotional control expressed through containment. It is the mastery of intensity without the need to display it. It is what Hill admired most in the powerful. They never needed to prove it. Their calm was the proof. There is a reason Hill taught that faith must be backed by action. Stillness is the proof of faith. When you can sit in uncertainty without desperation, remain calm in delay without surrendering your desire, and maintain clarity in conflict without distortion, you are not just surviving, you are dominating. And from this state, the mind no longer fights itself. Thought flows, emotion stabilizes, purpose amplifies. You don't just think more clearly, you move more clearly. Because you've cleared the noise. Let the undisciplined chase speed, let the frantic worship noise. You, as a builder of self-command, choose stillness, not because it's easy, but because it's the source of everything. In every human experience, there exists a narrow space, a sacred moment between stimulus and reaction. It is within this gap that all human freedom resides. And according to Napoleon Hill, The individuals who achieve greatness are not those who eliminate adversity, but those who command that space with mastery. Hill insisted that emotional discipline is not about suppression, but about intervention. When something triggers you, a comment, a delay, a disrespect, you stand at a crossroads. The average man collapses into habit. The superior man, trained in the laws of self-governance, pauses, processes, and chooses. This pause is where the mind separates from the masses. In The Law of Success, Hill describes the power of developing a calm, composed response as essential to cultivating initiative and leadership. He writes, "The man who moves with definiteness has already made his decisions before the challenge appears." This is not foresight, it is the consequence of owning the space between trigger and response, but owning that space requires training. Repeated emotional failure, anger, fear, jealousy, is proof of internal negligence. Hill never romanticized human nature. He saw it as clay, moldable by will. That space, that gap, can be lengthened, reinforced, and ultimately mastered through autosuggestion, meditation, and the habit of accurate thought. And accurate thought begins with asking the right question in the moment of pressure. What outcome do I serve by reacting this way? If the answer leads to regression, you wait. If the answer leads to progress, you move. This is not emotional reaction. This is emotional engineering. Hill taught that self-command is action governed by purpose, not by mood. When the devil in his allegory speaks of drifting, it is always preceded by emotional instability. The mind without purpose reacts to everything. The mind with a definite goal measures its responses. Not every battle is worth fighting. Not every word deserves an answer. Not every insult demands revenge. True power is knowing the difference. This principle must be internalized. Your strength is not in how forcefully you react, but in how consciously you respond. A single moment of emotional mastery can prevent 10 years of consequence. A single pause can protect an entire future. Ask yourself, when pressure rises, do I still choose? Or do I collapse into the conditioning of my past? This question is the mirror Napoleon Hill holds up to every man who seeks to ascend. The untrained mind is a puppet of past wounds. The trained mind is a creator of new futures. And this training cannot be episodic. It must be relentless. Daily visualization of poised reactions. Daily affirmations of calm command. Daily rehearsals of purpose-driven behavior. Emotional freedom is earned through emotional friction, moments where the old self wants to explode, but the new self chooses sovereignty. The men and women Hill revered were not stone. They felt deeply. But they ruled those feelings like a general commands an army. Every emotion had a function. Nothing was wasted. Every response was a strategic move, not a biological reflex. So the next time something ignites you, remember, your destiny is decided not by what happens to you, but by how you handle that invisible moment between the event and your response. That is where empires are either built or burned. Emotion is not your enemy. In fact, it is your most potent ally when transmuted correctly. Napoleon Hill taught that all human emotion carries energy, but it is unrefined energy. The average person allows it to explode outward through anger, fear, jealousy, or even uncontrolled excitement. But the disciplined individual transforms that emotional surge into fuel for creation, action, and vision. In Think and Grow Rich, Hill dedicates an entire chapter to the transmutation of sexual energy, but his underlying principle applies to all emotional energy. He writes, "When driven by emotion, men become gifted with superhuman ability." This is not metaphor, it is the core of transmutation, converting raw emotion into high-value output. Let's break this down. Emotion is movement. It is energy in motion. Every time you feel a surge, whether it's rage, desire, passion, frustration, what you're experiencing is potential power. But what separates those who build from those who burn is direction. Hill made it painfully clear. The emotions are not always safe guides. They are like wild horses unless they are trained. So how do we train them? It begins with observation. Every time you feel emotional intensity rising, you must catch it before it spills. That moment is sacred. Most people feel the heat and immediately explode or suppress, but the Napoleon Hill practitioner steps in. He witnesses the energy and begins the process of conversion. Step 1 is naming the emotion, not in a clinical way, but in a commanding way. For example, you feel intense irritation after being disrespected. Instead of erupting, you say internally, "I feel the heat of anger. This is raw power. I will refine it." That simple awareness cuts through unconscious reaction and creates space for transmutation. Step 2 is channeling the energy into your definite chief aim. Hill taught that definiteness of purpose is the magnet that organizes chaos into order. If your life lacks direction, your emotions will control you. But when you have a burning desire that defines your every action, you can redirect emotion toward that end. Anger becomes writing, jealousy becomes strategy, frustration becomes fuel. Hill studied the most successful men in America, and many of them had aggressive, even obsessive personalities. But what they all had in common was this: they redirected their emotion into production. Instead of arguing, they negotiated. Instead of lashing out, they refined their plans. Instead of seeking revenge, they executed harder, smarter, and more precisely. This is the essence of emotional transmutation. Now, understand this. Transmutation is not repression. Repression is emotional cancer. It hides emotion, allowing it to fester and sabotage you later. Transmutation, by contrast, elevates the emotion. It acknowledges the feeling, thanks it for its intensity, and directs it with purpose. Hill compared this process to turning water into steam. Water is passive. Steam powers machines. Another layer to this mastery is ritualization. You must build daily practices that train your body and mind to transmute by default. This is why Hill stressed the importance of auto-suggestion, repeating emotionally charged affirmations tied to your goals. When done consistently, these affirmations begin to rewire your instinctual responses. For example, instead of saying, "I'm angry," you've programmed yourself to think, "This is power. I will use it for my mission." Instead of "I'm scared," your automatic thought becomes, "Fear is the compass. I will move toward it with intelligence." This reframing is not psychological fluff. It is a Napoleon Hill requirement for mind mastery. Let's apply this further. Imagine you've just been humiliated publicly. The old self wants to strike back, prove your worth, reclaim dominance through aggression. But the transmuted self, trained in Hill's doctrine, absorbs the emotion and channels it into preparation. You study harder, you refine your craft, you use the sting of embarrassment as a sharpening stone. And when you return, it is not with vengeance, but with superior results. This is what Hill meant when he said that every adversity contains the seed of equal or greater benefit. That seed is often emotional. The man who learns to plant it wisely reaps a harvest of creation, not destruction. Emotional transmutation also fuels intuition. Hill taught that the subconscious mind is most powerful when emotionally stimulated. That means your greatest ideas, your most aligned decisions, your deepest insights often emerge during emotional intensity. If the emotion is channeled upward instead of outward. The musician writes his masterpiece in heartbreak. The inventor builds in obsession. The leader leads with passion forged in suffering. You must become an alchemist of emotion. Every feeling becomes a signal, not a sentence. Every pain becomes potential. Every desire becomes direction, but only if your mind is trained to lead your emotions, not the other way around. This is why Hill urged readers to form a mastermind alliance, because the presence of other emotionally intelligent minds allows for collective transmutation. The group doesn't react, it strategizes. In those environments, emotion becomes shared fuel for construction, not conflict. Now consider your own history. How many moments of pain, jealousy, or frustration have you wasted? How many times did you choose explosion over elevation, reaction over redirection? You cannot change the past. But with Hill's principles, you can rewrite the future in real time. Here is the final truth. Hill never sugarcoated. If you do not transmute your emotions, they will transmute you. They will change you, not into a higher version, but into a reactive, bitter, fragmented self. Your choice is this: refine the fire or be consumed by it. In the disciplined mind, emotion becomes art, action becomes precise, leadership becomes effortless, and life becomes a mirror of your internal mastery. You no longer fear your feelings, you wield them. Pressure is the environment in which success either collapses or crystallizes. According to Napoleon Hill, the greatest determinant of a man's legacy is not how he performs when conditions are favorable, but how he executes under fire. Pressure reveals the structure of your inner world. It exposes the gaps in your thinking, the limits of your discipline, and the truth of your belief. Hill made this concept unavoidable in Outwitting the Devil, where he warned that most people drift because they were never trained to operate when fear or resistance rises. They buckle at the first sign of adversity. They chase ease and comfort instead of mental rigor. But the disciplined individual sees pressure not as a threat, but as a training ground. Understand this: your mind can be conditioned to respond to pressure the same way an athlete conditions their body to perform under strain. But this requires deliberate exposure to mental tension paired with intentional control. It means embracing challenge, not merely surviving it. Hill was crystal clear. Mental stamina is built through controlled confrontation with difficulty. This is not positive thinking. This is cognitive restructuring. It's the act of taking internal command when the external world becomes uncertain. The first step in this conditioning is redefining what pressure means to you. To the average person, pressure is a trigger for panic. But to the Napoleon Hill practitioner, pressure is feedback. It tells you where your system breaks, what needs reinforcement, and what thought patterns must be reprogrammed. It's not an enemy, it's intelligence. Training the mind under pressure requires preparation rituals. Hill emphasized repetition and auto-suggestion as tools for building emotional muscle memory. You must practice composure before you need. This is why affirmations tied to calmness, clarity, and command are repeated daily. Not because words have magic, but because repetition installs belief. When you repeat to yourself, "I remain calm under pressure," you are not simply speaking. You are installing a new default. Eventually, the old reflex to panic gets overridden by the new command to focus. And this mental command becomes automatic the moment the pressure hits. But repetition alone is not enough. Hill insisted on purpose-driven pressure simulation. This means placing yourself deliberately in situations that test your mental stability: public speaking, decision-making under deadlines, emotional confrontations. Each event becomes a gym for your inner command. You don't just react, you practice control. One of Hill's most powerful ideas was that of definiteness backed by faith. When you train your mind to operate with definiteness, clear intention, you neutralize uncertainty. Faith, not in mysticism, but in your ability to dominate the moment, becomes your stabilizer. This is why pressure collapses the untrained. They never decided who they were before the challenge. But when your identity is rooted in discipline, Leadership and calm action. Pressure can't shake you, it reveals you. Another key factor Hill emphasized is emotional detachment. This doesn't mean being numb. It means being selective with what you allow to influence your decisions. Pressure often comes with noise, opinions, fear, doubt. The disciplined mind filters this noise. It sees through panic and isolates the signal, what must be done. And to reinforce this skill, Hill demanded accurate thinking, the habit of breaking complex pressure situations into manageable truths. When most people spiral into what if, you reduce the chaos into what is. You train yourself to operate from facts, not feelings. But here's the most overlooked aspect of mental pressure training: recovery. Hill understood that discipline includes rhythm. A mind under constant pressure without recovery becomes brittle. That's why stillness, solitude, and deliberate disengagement are also part of your arsenal. These aren't escapes, they're strategic resets. A warrior must rest to remain lethal. Let's go deeper. Under pressure, time appears to shrink. Deadlines loom, options narrow. In these moments, the average mind rushes, but the trained mind slows down internally, even when speeding up externally. Hill admired those who could move with urgency but think with stillness. That dichotomy, fast execution, slow mind, is the mark of mastery. You also must build visualization habits under pressure. Before stepping into a high-stakes situation, visualize not the victory, but the composure. See yourself breathing slowly, speaking clearly, moving decisively. By conditioning the body and nervous system to feel calm under mental stress, you create familiarity, and the body obeys what the mind rehearses. Napoleon Hill's philosophy does not promise that pressure will disappear. It promises that you can dominate it, and through daily discipline, emotional training, and purposeful exposure to adversity, your mind becomes conditioned to treat pressure like a signal, not a sentence. Ask yourself, how do I currently respond when things go wrong? Does my mind collapse into chaos? Or does it tighten its focus, slow down, and sharpen its decision? The answer reveals your current conditioning, but more importantly, it shows you exactly what must be retrained. Because make no mistake, if you want to lead, build, or influence at any meaningful level, pressure is permanent. It is not something to avoid, it is something to integrate. And the sooner you train your mind to move through it with clarity and calm, the sooner you separate yourself from those still flinching every time life pushes back. Every man who dares to rise will face it: criticism, opinion, misunderstanding. The voices of others, sharp with doubt or disguised as concern, will come to test your self-governance. Napoleon Hill treated this not as an obstacle, but as an initiation. To him, the ability to remain internally unmoved by external noise is not a personality trait. It is a non-negotiable skill in the architecture of success. Hill was relentless in stating that most failures can be traced not to lack of ability, but to the corrosive influence of others' opinions. In Think and Grow Rich, he writes, "Close friends and relatives, while not meaning to do so, often handicap one through opinions and sometimes through ridicule." His warning is clear. Those who speak the most are often those who have achieved the least. And if you're not prepared, their voices will become the script you live by. You must build a mental fortress, a system of inner strength built from principle, not approval. This fortress is not loud. It does not argue or explain itself. It simply stands immovable, unshaken, and focused. And this fortress begins with identity. Hill emphasized that a person without a definite chief aim is a victim of outside influence. When you don't know what you stand for, you fall into the emotional cycles of others. You react to their fear. You absorb their jealousy. You shrink under their doubt. But once you define your mission, once you write it out, read it daily, and tattoo it on your consciousness, opinions lose power. The key is not avoiding criticism. It's being immune to it. And immunity is not indifference, it is transcendence. Hill taught that true leaders listen selectively. They receive information, but pass it through the filters of purpose and principle. Only what aligns is absorbed. The rest is discarded without friction. Criticism only wounds the ego. And Hill was adamant. Ego is the enemy of growth. Ego demands validation. It craves applause, but purpose demands focus. When your identity is rooted in external approval, every comment becomes a threat. But when it's rooted in internal standard, you are unshakable. To build this immunity, Hill prescribed controlled exposure. Deliberately place yourself in situations where criticism is likely. Speak your truth. Act on your convictions. Release your work publicly, not to be praised, but to become immune. Every attack becomes an opportunity to reinforce your boundaries, and you must ask, whose opinion matters? Hill insisted on surrounding yourself with a mastermind, a group of individuals whose minds are aligned with growth, not gossip. Their feedback sharpens you. But outside that circle, the world's opinions are noise, background static, not symphonies. Emotional mastery also plays a vital role. Hill's teachings demand that we train ourselves to observe reactions before responding. When criticism arrives, the untrained mind either collapses or retaliates, but the disciplined mind pauses, asks, is this aligned with my purpose? Is this coming from someone qualified to judge? If not, it is archived and released. No defense, no debate, only forward motion. This forward motion is a mental state called non-attachment. It does not mean you don't care. It means you care more about mission than emotion. You protect your energy. You refuse to bleed for battles that don't build you. And this mental clarity multiplies productivity because you no longer waste time healing from non-lethal wounds. Understand, Hill believed in feedback, but only from sources grounded in wisdom, action, and results. He warned us not to be influenced by those who have never achieved anything themselves. If their lives are not models of what you seek, their voices are irrelevant. You must also manage your inner critic. Often, external criticism only activates voices that already live within you. That's why Hill instructed daily repetition of positive auto-suggestions, not as affirmation fluff, but as psychological warfare. You're replacing inherited scripts with engineered commands. Write it down, speak it aloud. I am unmoved by opinion. My value is rooted in action. My mission speaks for itself. Say it not once, but constantly until your subconscious mind believes it more than it believes the doubt of others. There is also tactical silence. The disciplined mind does not defend itself at every provocation. It moves, it executes, and its work becomes the only necessary response. Hill believed this was the highest level of personal power. When your presence answers questions, your voice never has to address. And when criticism is accurate, you don't resist it, you refine from it. The mind, trained by Hill's principles, does not attach ego to feedback. It extracts insight, upgrades the system, and continues without emotional friction. This is not weakness. This is supreme confidence, because only the secure can be corrected without collapse. So the next time someone questions your path, your ideas, your pace, ask yourself, have they built anything worth emulating? If not, their voice is background noise to your focused construction. Hill would remind you, opinions are the cheapest commodities on earth. Never pay with your peace. Never trade your progress for their comfort. From now on, criticism will not define you. It will reveal you. And every opinion you ignore with poise becomes another stone in the fortress of your indomitable mind. In every internal state, rage, peace, focus, despair, there is a law in operation, the law of emotional momentum. Napoleon Hill did not name it as such, but every one of his teachings implies it. He showed, through example and instruction, that emotions once activated tend to expand. The man who cannot interrupt his emotional momentum is doomed to spiral. The man who can command it becomes unstoppable. Emotions, like thoughts, are not isolated events. They are forces, subject to acceleration. Hill believed that the subconscious mind picks up on the emotional tone of repeated thoughts and then begins to amplify them. This means that a single moment of fear, if not interrupted, can grow into anxiety, paralysis, and ultimately inaction. Conversely, a single act of courage, if reinforced, builds into confidence, faith, and bold execution. You are never standing still. You are either compounding fear or compounding power. And this compounding is determined by what you do with the first emotional impulse. That is why Hill was obsessive about immediate action tied to positive thought. He knew the power of a single emotional spark. The only question is, do you fan the flame or smother it? To command emotional momentum, you must first recognize the trigger. Hill's accurate thinking model demands that you constantly question what you're feeling and why. Is this fear grounded in fact or fiction? Is this frustration tied to actual failure or to expectation distortion? The ability to label the emotion accurately is the first step to changing its trajectory. Next is emotional substitution. Hill taught that the human mind cannot hold two dominant thoughts simultaneously. So when a destructive emotion emerges, you do not fight it, you replace it. Fear is substituted with faith, doubt with decision, anger with strategy. This substitution is not natural, it is trained. It requires mental rehearsals, morning declarations, and constant reinforcement. Then comes reinforcement through repetition. Emotional momentum thrives on loops. The more you dwell on a feeling, the stronger it becomes. Hill insisted that you must guard your mind with militant intention. If a negative emotion arises, you address it immediately. You speak the opposite. You act in defiance of it. You refuse to allow it to grow legs. This is the reason Hill valued immediate action so highly. When a powerful positive emotion hits, enthusiasm, inspiration, vision, you must act on it at once. Otherwise, it decays. Emotional power is perishable. The man who delays execution loses momentum. And without momentum, belief weakens and resistance returns. Let's apply this practically. Imagine you feel a deep surge of inspiration to write, to build, to reach out to someone who could change your life. But instead of acting, you think, you hesitate, you plan. The emotion fades, and in its place grows doubt, distraction, and regression. Hill would say, do it now. This was not just a productivity hack, it was a law of momentum in action. This law applies equally to failure. When you experience a setback, the emotional response can spiral into identity unless you interrupt it. Hill's solution was emotional. Recovery rituals, written affirmations, revisiting your definite purpose, reconnecting with your mastermind alliance. These were not motivational tools. They were momentum control levers. Momentum is also contagious. Hill knew the power of environment. You must surround yourself with individuals who are emotionally disciplined, purpose-driven, and forward-moving. Why? Because emotions synchronize. If you walk into a room of focused, calm minds, your nervous system calibrates. The same happens with chaos. This is why Hill warned us to choose associations with ruthless selectivity. And momentum is not just internal, it's behavioral. Every time you take action in alignment with your purpose, you generate psychological proof. This proof compounds. You begin to see yourself as a person who acts, who doesn't hesitate, who faces discomfort and moves anyway. That identity, built through repetition, creates emotional resilience, but you must also guard against false momentum. Hill warned of emotional highs that are unearned. Excitement without execution is deception. He wrote of the hypnotic rhythm, the loop of pleasure without progress that leads men to drift. You must constantly audit your momentum. Is this moving me forward, or just making me feel good? There will be days when the emotional momentum is negative, days when doubt reappears, when fear feels real, when nothing inside you wants to act. These are the most important days of your life, because how you respond on those days determines whether your momentum belongs to you or to the world. Hill's instruction was clear. Discipline your mind before life forces you to. Because once negative momentum takes root, it takes 10x the effort to reverse. But if you train daily, through thought control, intentional language, disciplined movement, you become a being of pure acceleration. In time, your emotions will no longer control you. They will serve you. You will feel the initial spark of fear and immediately convert it into strategy. You will feel the impulse to rage and redirect it into execution. You will feel the seed of doubt and crush it with decisive action. This is not theory, this is mental law. Napoleon Hill did not leave us with poetry, he left us with instruction. And the instruction is this: emotional momentum is the invisible hand that shapes your destiny. Control it or be controlled by it. All roads in Napoleon Hill's philosophy lead to one gate: self-mastery, not success, not money, not recognition. Those are effects. The ultimate cause, the hidden engine behind every achievement Hill ever documented, is the total domination of one's self. The mind, the emotions, the body, the decisions, all brought under conscious, disciplined control. Self-mastery is not the elimination of chaos in life. It is the refusal to be altered by it. It is the unbreakable center from which all execution flows. In Think and Grow Rich, Hill emphasized definiteness of purpose as the nucleus of all success. But without self-mastery, definiteness crumbles under stress. Goals vanish in emotion. Plans are abandoned at the first sign of resistance. That is why Hill placed self-discipline not as an accessory to success, but as its guardian. To master the self is to deny the comfort of excuses, to act with precision while the rest of the world waits for motivation, to create systems that enforce forward motion, regardless of mood. Hill made it clear, success requires no apologies. Failure permits no alibis. You either lead yourself or you get led by your circumstances, and what defines the master is consistency, not intensity, not hype, but the daily, brutal enforcement of one's values and standards. While others need to feel good to act, the self-mastered man acts because he decided to, long before the moment arrived. He does not seek alignment with his feelings, he creates alignment through behavior. This kind of man does not check social media before meditation. He does not scroll before journaling. He does not delay what must be done. His environment is not louder than his mission. He guards his inputs. He engineers his mornings. He carries himself in silence, because silence is the sound of strength. Hill warned that the devil's greatest tool was drifting, the slow erosion of discipline through comfort, passivity, and emotional indulgence. But self-mastery is the antidote to drift. When your time, thoughts, and energy are directed by your will, drifting becomes impossible. You don't float, you forge. There's a fire in the eyes of the self-disciplined, not the fire of ego or display, but the fire of knowing that nothing within them is left untrained, that their reactions are measured, their impulses filtered, their habits sacred, that fire cannot be faked, and it cannot be taught by words alone. It is earned through the battlefield of repeated obedience. Hill taught that your greatest enemy is yourself, your moods, your laziness, your weakness. But in that same sentence he offered the cure. Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. When you believe that you are worthy of command, and when you train like your life depends on it, because it does, then self-mastery becomes not a goal, but a way of being. And with that, everything changes. People feel it in your presence. Doors open because of your certainty. Opportunities multiply because your reliability is rare. You become trusted, not because of charisma, but because of consistency. You say little, but your presence speaks loud. This is the unseen reward of discipline, freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to never be ruled by what you don't want. The freedom to walk into any situation, face any storm, and know, I am already prepared. I am already trained. My emotions are not steering me. My vision is this is not about perfection, it is about direction. The self-mastered man still fails, but he never stops. He still feels, but he never lets feeling override his system. He still doubts, but he never lets doubt decide. He is human, but governed. So I ask you now, not with judgment, but with clarity. Have you mastered your mornings? Have you disciplined your thoughts? Have you forged rituals stronger than your excuses? Have you trained your emotions to serve, not sabotage? If not, then let this be the day you decide. Not tomorrow, not when it's convenient, but now. Because no one is coming to build your mind for you. No one will enforce your standards but you, and the world does not wait for the untrained. Self-mastery is not a prize, it is a gate. And on the other side is everything you've ever said you wanted: power, peace, presence, purpose. But that door does not open with words, it opens with work. Decide today to become the kind of person who does not break, who does not drift, who does not live by reaction, but who stands every single day in full command of themselves. If this video has ignited something inside you, share it with 3 people who need to hear this truth. Write in the comments, I am the master of my mind. And if you're part of this elite in the making, sign up now.